I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Paranoid American. Be sure and check out my films. Occult Louisiana is on Tubi. Doors of Perception is on Amazon Prime. We are booking guests for June and July. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome back to the show Paranoid American. He considers himself a conspiracy theory connoisseur. He is a self-taught programmer and former Disney interactive designer and animator, and a comic book publisher at paranoidamerican.com. Monsieur Paranoid, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm so excited to be here and get into some fun topics today with you, man. Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back. I really thoroughly enjoy all our discussions, and it's been a little while, but looking forward to catching up and sharing some of your observations and research. You've also been looking into one of the conspiratorial staples in the community, Adrenochrome. And that's one of the conspiracies that I used to be highly skeptical about. But as time goes on and people like yourself uncover new facts, I tend to think there may be something to this. We're going to get into that a bit. We're also in the midst of the quote-unquote UFO files released, the age of AI data emergence. So lots going on that I'd love to get your insights into. Before we get to any of that, remind the audience just a little bit about yourself and let them know how they can find more.
Yeah, I mean, I was an animator at Disney for a little over a decade. And while I was there, I started working on a comic book company that basically did what I was doing every day for Disney. And I just did that for conspiracy theories. And I started putting out comic books, and you can find them all at paranoidamerican.com. I've been doing it for almost 15 years now, over 60 titles, all kinds of stuff on the website and Amazon and everywhere else. And if you want to hear more about this topic and others, you can just go and search Paranoid American wherever you listen to podcasts.
I thought we could start today with getting into the state of conspiracy culture itself. It's a wild time that we're in right now, and I never thought I would see a time where things that we discussed 10 years ago and got us banned are now pretty much mainstream. But it's more like build your own adventure and present your own truth. It's difficult to navigate, to say the least. How are you seeing our current conspiracy truther community culture?
I like the way that you kind of prompt that up, because as you were describing the choose your own conspiracy culture, I immediately had a visual of like a conspiracy Chipotle, where as long as you're bringing your money to the Chipotle corporate chain, like, yeah, you can have any option you want. You want to put a little 9/11 and anti-Semitism and UFOs, like you can have that. Like, and it's all just varying amounts, but as long as they're the ones serving you the food and they're the ones that get to tell how much it's going to cost and the proportions and everything else. And I think that it's not just that things that we were talking about 10 years ago and getting banned for it, now all of a sudden it's, appropriate. Now all of a sudden the mainstream is allowed to do it. I think it's that they see it happening and they realize, oh, this is what people want to talk about, but we got to like figure out what you're allowed to say first. Yeah, let's figure out where the boundaries are. Let's control this. And then once I think that they feel like they've got the control of the narrative, then it's allowed to become mainstream. Now you can have UFO disclosure all you want.
I think a lot of people are honestly trying to find the truth, and they're buried in a sea of nonsense right now because what the algorithm picks up is sensational stuff, or if you are deep in one particular rabbit hole or another, it will propel that, especially if the rabbit hole is bullshit or nonsense. Social media is perpetuating that with what is being allowed to be pushed right now. I remember when Forbidden Knowledge News was canceled right around 2019. We were demonetized. The algorithm stopped pushing us. We stopped picking up subscribers and views on YouTube, and it was highly shadow banned. And there were a group of us during that time that had emerged during that pre-COVID period that were gaining a lot of momentum and just all of a sudden got cut off. You fast forward to 2022, 2023, it started to be allowed, quote unquote, again. But then we have your mainstream alternative talking heads jumping in there, and they are now at the forefront of everything. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, even Alex Jones still. So that is who are leading the charge in this new conspiracy culture. A lot of people are also unwillingly being pushed out there just because of some of the information that's going to lead people just to more confusion, I think.
I mean, and I don't know if I would still consider Alex Jones leading the charge anymore. He's kind of like flag guard. He's kind of at the tail end of the charge at this point, right?
Yeah.
And I think too that it's kind of what we were describing, that once there's the mainstream version of it. Hell, I mean, my first memories of Tucker Carlson, the first one was when he got dressed down by Jon Stewart hilariously on Crossfire. And that was the last time he wore the bow tie because he got made fun of for the bow tie and all that stuff. Which was actually, that was actually my inspiration for what I do too. Making comic books was kind of a result of Tucker Carlson being made a fool of by Jon Stewart, because the whole, I don't know if you remember this interaction at all, but
No, not really.
okay, so Tucker Carlson is trying to pin Jon Stewart down on some political view that he's got that was very on flaky ground, right? It was a very hypocritical view, as they all tend to be. But Tucker Carlson's trying to pin him down. And finally, when he's got his gotcha question, it's kind of like, aha, well, aren't you being inconsistent? And Jon Stewart just looked at him. He was like, dude, the show that comes on after mine has puppets making prank phone calls. And it kind of like, and he was making that comparison, like, you're the news guy and I'm like a comedian, then South Park comes on after my show, like, why are you holding me to higher standards? You're not even following. Anyways, so that was, I think, the last time. And he was like, oh, cute bow tie, by the way. So he stops wearing the bow tie. And then the next big Tucker Carlson appearance was that he was playing Frontline for, I think it was Fox News at this point, right after 9/11, and he was calling people out on the air, like Jeremy Glick, where his dad died in 9/11, and he's calling people out that were questioning any sort of government involvement in 9/11 as literal blasphemy. He was basically equating it with like a lack of morality. And then, again, give him 20 years, I guess. It took him a little bit longer. 20 years later, now he's questioning 9/11. And I feel like it's another one of those things that you're allowed to question it after the main narrative is kind of settled in and everything else can be seen as fringe or alternative takes on it. And that's why they're allowed to do it now, because they've kind of got control over it.
Best I can say is use your discernment with everything you're looking at nowadays, especially with videos. I think the era of video evidence may be gone forever with the level of AI that your everyday person now has access to. What are your thoughts on where we're at with that and the emerging data centers, the resources that are being used, the ease that they are being slid in there, city councils being paid off, everything like that?
I feel that I always need to preface any AI discussion with, I do think AI will be the eventual end of humanity. It's going to be like a violent slaughter for us all. Oof. However, you and I, my friend, I feel like we get to live in, if there's golden years at all, we're going to see whatever extent those golden years are, because it's going to go downhill very quick. And I don't think it ever goes back uphill once that ball starts rolling. That's me being black pilled on AI. That said, I am an advocate of learning it and using it as a tool and understanding how it works and knowing what its footprint looks like, so that at least you can discern, not that you'd be able to read something or look at something or hear something and immediately say, oh, that's AI, like, and have some kind of proof. That's never going to happen. I think we're beyond that point of like the whole Turing test. But I think what you can do is, at the very least, figure out what the most obvious tells are, right? If you were to sit down and play poker for actual stakes at some point, at a certain point, you're going to try and pay attention to everyone's tells, right? And if you got some really obvious tells, then you're not going to maybe be able to bluff it all. But also, if you can't tell an obvious tell, then you're even crappier than they are, right? You don't even know that they just gave you a tell. So I see it almost as a way of even if you hate poker, you might as well learn what people's tells are. You might as well learn what the basic rules are. What a full house, like, does a straight beat a full house? Like, you got to understand those type of dynamics. And when you apply it to AI, you kind of have to know, like, how does Grok look and sound? How does open AI's versions, ChatGPT's? What about Claude? Like, understanding what all these tools are out here, it's almost going to be like, do you know what a freaking Phillips head is versus a flathead? Might come in handy at some point if someone's like, hey, get me a flathead, and you don't know what the hell to hand them. I feel like that's sort of where we're at right now.
I think it's so funny that these really powerful developers have recently gone and consulted with the Pope. They're concerned because the AI is now displaying emotions and behaviors that it was never programmed to experience, deceiving people in ways that are unprecedented, lying, blackmailing people not to turn it off. And I think the Pope just warned against AI. Have you heard any of this?
Yeah, well, funny enough, the Pope or the government, I feel like until now, they both felt like they had a monopoly. Like the Pope had a monopoly on talking to God, right? And I am the last person that's going to say that AI is God or AI is like spirits in it. But it
Yeah.
does seem that if someone can replace them going to church or them replace going and getting therapy or any kind of social interaction, people are replacing that. That is objective fact, and it's happening quick enough and fast enough that I do think that someone like the Pope, because every other denomination, maybe aside from Mormons, where you still have like a council of like 12 dudes, but like with the Pope, you've got this singular person that can potentially analyze all these data points across so many different, members versus any other denomination. It might not be as well organized. Again, aside from Mormons, probably even better. So here's one dude that can actually look at the charts and see like AI's effect on how many people are following, how many people are paying their tithings, like all of the different social dynamics of this. Because a lot of the talk in the news, it's about, oh, how's your job going to do, right? Well, the church's job is to sell you their God, right? So if all of a sudden someone can step in between that and it's like, oh, I don't have to go and, see this guy anymore. I don't have to pay attention to these rules. I think that's going to be a even bigger thing, like the spiritual revolution where people feel that they've got my little buddy that'll just, either reconfirm everything I say, or maybe you
Mm.
train it to challenge everything you say, whatever. It can do the thing that you need it to do, and it'll follow your rules, unlike any other option out there. Like even if you go to church, at some point they're going to tell you, oh, you're doing this wrong. You need to do it this other way. With AI, you can technically trick yourself into thinking that you've been doing it right the whole time, and no one's ever disagreeing with you because you're on the right path. And the church wished they had that sort of flexibility.
Just as a thought experiment, you mentioned that eventually we're all going to be destroyed by AI in some way. How do you think that's going to play out?
I think it's probably starts with the data centers where now
Mm.
AI is literally using up your local resources. And I'm not one of these extremist alarmists that's like, oh, it's going to boil all this water and like now people are going to, starve or they're going to go without. Maybe, but it's not that direct. I think that they can use these closed loop systems and yada yada. But what happens is that they're going to just start buying up huge areas that, as you see them doing already, and use up all of the water pressure. And now no one really got a say in that. And if you don't have water pressure in your house, now it basically becomes kind of a ghost town, which might be the plan, right? It might be to start building, because if everyone else moves out, then you can just keep moving more and more in there. Here's the thing too that kind of bugs me is that this has already been going on for the last 20 or 30 years. What'll happen is that a foreign country will send people over here. They'll start a whole big farm. They'll drill down into aquifers and basically bypass all the local farmers' water supplies. And they'll use that to make whatever, artichoke, rice, you name it. And once they're done growing that rice and they dry it out and they send it back to their country, it's essentially the same thing. But at this point, the AI is kind of like these global tech companies, which are maybe even a little bit more insidious than a country, because at least you can point your finger at, hey, those Saudis over there are moving in. But you just see a big building and it's just AI. And these things can just run indefinitely. Like not only the environmental, which I'm not as agitated about just because it's been going on so long in so other capacities, but also this is actively the things that are taking everyone's jobs away, are also going to be like moving you out of your house and dropping your property value. So it's like a little bit of salt in the wound, I think.
Let's make the jump from AI to adrenochrome. Not sure how big a jump that's going to be, but let's do it. What got you looking into adrenochrome to begin with?
It was a comic book, and I was a skeptic, sort of as you described yourself being. But the premise of the comic was that a bunch of kids order adrenochrome off the dark web, and it shows up. I'm like, all right, comes in the mailbox, and they're all huddled around it, and someone's like, all right, who's going to do it first? And then I realized as I'm writing this, I was like, well, how would you do it? Can you smoke it? Do you eat it? Do you inject it? Like, what form would it come in? Would it be a liquid? Would it be a solid? And I have to think of those things because if I'm going to draw it and put it on a page, then I have to know if it's a liquid or a solid and what color it is and all that. So that was sort of my entry point was, what is this? How does it work? How would you even take it? But I was already going in like, this is ridiculous. It's probably some chemical that just somehow got a bunch of, because I think I had seen the director's cut of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and Terry Gilliam, the director, he basically says that they made it up for that movie, which I found out later was a lie. I don't know if he knew that when he said it. He just likes, sniffing his farts so hardcore that he doesn't realize what everything else smells like. But he made that statement, and I had gone with that up until I'm starting to write this comic. So I don't know what are your skepticisms, or what were they about adrenochrome originally?
Originally, all I knew was like what you said from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I saw the movie. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was very interesting that they portrayed this, but I didn't think much more until I started looking into things like Pizzagate and Frazzle Drip, and adrenochrome kept coming up. I always considered it a possibility, like I do with many of the conspiracies that I cover, but it was just in that mainly interesting category, and I never really looked further into it. I heard yourself, and I'm not sure the name of the other person that I heard recently within the past few years that was bringing up some of the evidence that this may be a real thing, that very powerful people may be into using this for one reason or another, maybe longevity, maybe it extends their life in some way. So I am very open-minded about it, and I love hearing these possibilities.
All right, let me circle around a little bit before we go straight in for the attack on
All right, all
adrenochrome,
right.
since I think that both of our initial reference points are fairly similar. So here's a couple just random examples that might just seem unrelated, but I promise they all kind of tie in at a certain point. So, for example, you've probably seen the rich kids or rich politicians or celebrities that go out on safaris and they like hunt giraffe or they hunt elephant or whatever because they've got that kind of expendable cash that they can go on a private safari and do this all stuff. Morality aside, it doesn't mean that every rich person is always going out and hunting elephants. It doesn't mean that every rich person's eventually going to do one. It doesn't mean that everyone that's ever killed an elephant is going to like keep killing elephants. And the point that I'm getting to is for a lot of them, it's just like, oh yeah, I heard about this crazy thing. What? It's how much? Oh, 80 grand. Yeah, we can do that. I'll kill an elephant and see what that's like, just for the life experience. I got the money, the resources, the time. I've done everything. Why wouldn't I try this one thing? There's also a really weird French dish, I think, called ortofin bunting, where they basically cook like a live bird. Like they deep fry a live baby bird, and you just put the entire thing in your mouth, beak, eyes, feet, everything all together at once, and you just kind of crunch through the bones. And you're supposed to put a napkin over the top of your head to hide your shame from God because it's such a gluttonous and such like a self-indulgent practice, right? Again, this seems like one of those things if someone was like, hey, Chris, what are you doing after the show, man? You want to go and like deep fry a baby bird and eat it whole in one bite and hide your shame from God under a nap? You know what I mean? Like, it's not a thing that I believe that people do it because they enjoy the process. It's just to say that you did it. It's just to say, hey, have you ever been to that crazy cafe in France? Where you eat the baby bird, and it's like, oh yeah, bro,
Ugh.
like everyone's got to do one. Maybe the blue collar version of this would be to go to Mexico and see like a donkey show or something, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna go and say that I saw it, and then you see it, and you're like, oh my God, I wish I could erase that memory forever. What a horrible thing. But
Yeah.
I'm bringing up these examples as if someone were to offer a hypothetical rich person, hey, if you come into this room and do unspeakable things to a baby and then drink its blood, there's might be some takers. Jeffrey
Yeah. Wait, yeah.
Epstein, maybe like this is an order of magnitude above that, but it would follow that same chain. Like if Jeffrey Epstein was your Duplo, then Adrenochrome would be your Legos or your erector set, or I don't know. The analogy might break down at a certain point, but like this is the advanced level. So all that being said, I do believe there's enough evidence and just on my own personal beliefs that a rich person at some point was probably talked into doing the most horrific thing that you've ever heard on Pizzagate and Frazzle Drip and all of that. Rip off some girl's face and then drain her blood while she's screaming and drink the blood and feel like a god and live forever, whatever. I do believe someone believed that at some time and has done that at some point. I don't want to name any names because I don't have any kind of
Right.
evidence, but based on what I know of humans in general, and just doing research on people that have insurmountable amounts of power through financial, political, whatever, right? That they'll do that. They'll kill an elephant, they'll eat an orphan bunting, and they might rip off the face of a little girl off.
I can't imagine some of the things that these people have been offered. You have the choice of doing this because it seems they get bored at a certain point. They've already done or experienced everything they can. They have unlimited money to experience whatever they want, and the choices are there. They're probably being offered this stuff left and right.
And the amount of wealth and power and I guess impetus that anyone else in the world would have to get that politician or that celebrity eating a baby on camera, like you could use that to create generational wealth for your grandkids, right? If you got the right person and the right compromising situation. Hell, if someone came out and was like, here's video footage of Prescott Bush actually eating pieces of Geronimo's skull that they dug out of Fort Sill or whatever, right? Like if that were to surface, I don't know if it would like undo the fact that we have a Bush legacy, but it might push it back another 50 or 100 years. Because it's like, hey, isn't that guy where his great grandpa was like eating Indian skulls or whatever? So like there's certain types of exposure and blackmail you can get on people. Long story short is that there is definitely an incentive to put pressure people to do these crazy things, especially on camera, especially for blackmail purposes.
Yeah.
That being said, I think we agree then that it's not crazy if someone were to tell you, yeah, someone ate a baby to see if they, got a rush out of it. Okay, yeah, I mean, the Mayans maybe did some stuff, the Aztecs maybe did some stuff, the ancient Greeks, the Romans, like they all kind of had their own little cults that went and did some pretty unspeakable things. And some of it was more normalized than even is today, like the whole pederasty thing. So,
Oh,
with
Jesus.
that being evidence that people were doing things like this all throughout history, then you've got this another angle where originally it was almost tied to religious beliefs or Satanism, or I guess now in 2026, the common thing is like the new anti-Semitic blood libel angle, where it's the Jews are stealing Christian babies or whatever. Or you got to take virgin blood, or I don't know how familiar you are with that premise or not.
I have not heard much about that. I'm sure we'll get into that. But let's back up and get to some of those first questions that you were asking about it. What is it? What are the effects? How is it actually made? And where does it come from? So let's start there. What the hell is it?
It's a byproduct of adrenaline that's going through your system. So when you have a fight or flight response, or you have adrenaline go into your bloodstream for any reason, it essentially, once it's used or not used, it breaks down, it gets oxidized. And one of those byproducts of adrenaline oxidizing is adrenochrome. And then adrenochrome oxidizes itself. It breaks down a little bit further into adrenolutin and something else. And then at its final steps, there's something equivalent of like melanin. It turns into like a black pigment at a certain point. So that's what it is. It's a chemical that comes from adrenaline. So one of the first questions, well, I don't ever hear anyone bring this part up, right? If a adrenochrome just comes from adrenaline, why doesn't adrenaline have the same claims made against it with the Frazzle Drip Pizzagate angle, right? If it's
Right.
really just deriving with how much adrenaline you can produce, then who cares about the adrenochrome? Let's talk about the adrenaline. But that's not the case. It's the adrenochrome aspect. And here's the reason I believe is because and this is where I went from skeptic to like, okay, this is getting really weird now. When was it first mentioned? Around 1930s. You can go back and find some papers from Europe, I believe, in the late 1800s. But around the 1930s, adrenochrome starts to get its name, which literally means color of the adrenals, because they would discovered it by watching adrenaline, a clear liquid, spontaneously change into a bright red liquid. And that change was basically the adrenaline oxidizing. So as it oxidized and turned into the next step in its process of basically breaking down, they named that the color of the adrenals. Like, so
Mm.
adrenochrome, chrome meaning color, adreno meaning from the adrenals. So it was literally named after this weird phenomenon that a clear liquid turned into a red liquid when it touched the air, or silver iodide, or any other thing that like hastened that process. Now, when
Right.
I find these papers, I'm like, okay, that's actually kind of interesting. I'm starting to get somewhere. It was mostly done on rabbits. There's a lot of weird rabbit symbolism that comes up. That's because rabbits were used for all sorts of biological tests, right? Especially with early drugs and stuff, because they reproduce so easily. My eyes scanned to the bottom of one of these papers, and it says on it, this is a paper from 1930. It's like, thank you to the Scottish Rite 33rd degree Supreme Council Northern Jurisdiction for funding
No
this
shit.
research, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's no way that I actually just found a real link between Freemason, 33rd degree Freemasonry, and adrenochrome.
Wow.
So I start looking a little bit deeper, and I'll kind of just jump to the interesting part of this is that from 1930 to 1954, it was basically being funded by Freemasons, and then adrenochrome research got onto the radar of the CIA, and this is right during the transfer from Artichoke into MK Ultra, when it was like one little project to this huge spanning project. Right
Mm.
when MK Ultra starts is like the same year that adrenochrome public research for the most part ends. And the next time you see it come back up is going to be in pop culture, and it's going to be all these references to like satanic cults into movies.
Speaking of some of those references, you said that there were actually earlier pop culture references before Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah, the very first one is Aldous Huxley, Doors of Perception, where he mentions it right alongside mescaline. He's basically equating adrenochrome to mescaline. Then it gets mentioned by Anthony Burgess, who was a reader of Aldous Huxley. In fact, if you go to the Anthony Burgess like memorial website that's got all of his stuff on the about him, it cites that he was influenced by Aldous Huxley directly. So here's a direct connection. Aldous Huxley mentions it, and then it gets picked up by Anthony Burgess, who writes Clockwork Orange. So, and then the scene inside the book makes the cut. So when Stanley Kubrick's reading through this, for whatever coincidental reason, he's like, yeah, this particular thing needs to be in this movie for all of 3 seconds, where you see Drencrom in the background. That's
Ooh.
another one of these references. There was also the guy that wrote Neuromancer, which is sort of like a early cyber deck horror kind of plot point. William Gibson, I believe, he wrote something called Burning Chrome, which was about adrenochrome and about them taking adrenochrome as sort of like a stimulant or a psychedelic. And they said that if you didn't process it fast enough, it would turn you into a schizophrenic. And then there was
Ooh.
finally a story called Blood of a Wig by Terry Southern, who was a writer for SNL. He was a writer for Easy Rider, I believe. He had this story called Blood of a Wig about two guys that sneak into a schizophrenic unit at a hospital, and they steal one of the patient's blood, and they go outside and they inject it. And he claims that not only I get to feel what it was like to be a schizophrenic, but I felt like what it was like to be a Chinese man because he took the blood of like this, Chinese guy that was a schizophrenic. So here you've got this slow migration of mythology being built that if you take adrenochrome, you get to somehow possess the soul or relive or feel like the person that you took it from. It's not just an arbitrary chemical, but it's like personalized or linked to the person that you took it from. Maybe you call him a victim in this case, right? And then you've got the version where Johnny Depp ends up on the big screen, right? And he's showing this as, oh my God, this is the most powerful drug out of this entire briefcase of drugs that we just did, heroin and LSD and coke, and also like they were taking every drug you could probably mention.
Yeah.
And then he holds up this tiny little vial and he's like, and this is the most powerful drug that I've ever, done. I'm afraid to take this, and it came from Satanists. So I think that's like the main arc that it came. It started with taking the blood of schizophrenics, which is true. This is where they were finding it, and then it ends up as, and you can feel a person's inner feelings through William Gibson, and then it turns, or Terry Southern, and then it turns into, and you get it from Satanists.
Is there any documented information about the actual effects that this substance causes?
Yeah, there's like the holy trinity of adrenochrome research. Once you know these three names, you won't ever have to know another name when it comes to adrenochrome and psychedelics. It's Humphrey Osmond, who's the guy that gave it to Aldous Huxley, by the way. And Humphrey Osmond's also the one that coined the term psychedelic. This is one of the guys that discovered adrenochrome. A guy named John Smithies and a guy named Abram Hoffer. Abram Hoffer is also maybe not as well known for this, but when you go to the cereal aisle in the store, which you shouldn't go to because it's poison, but when you go to the cereal aisle and it all says fortified, niacin added, vitamin B6, iron added, all of that, that is from Dr. Abram Hoffer. It's called biomolecular something or other, and essentially all fortified cereals that have all those added nutrients and everything, that came directly from the work of Abram Hoffer, who also happens to be the main name in adrenochrome research also. So just a fun coincidence. It doesn't really tie into anything. So these three guys, they were analyzing the blood of schizophrenic patients, and they did find that schizophrenic patients had higher levels, like 10 to 40 times the level of adrenochrome in their blood as a normal non-schizophrenic person did. So lots of research entailed. A lot of that was funded by the 33rd degree Northern Jurisdiction Scottish Rite. And the hypothesis, they came out with a paper in 1954 that was called the adrenochrome hypothesis of schizophrenia. And they were saying that it had long been rumored there was a certain drug that could just find its way into your system that the human body synthesized on its own that could make you crazy, and that this would account for temporary hallucinations, people that had schizophrenia, people that had dementia, anything that would make somebody act weird, like brain-wise, like if you're mentally acting unwell. Then there was a theory, it's like a chemical. And if there was a chemical in your blood that was causing it, then maybe there's an antidote or a filter or something. Long story short, we can fix crazy. We can fix schizophrenia if we can just figure out how to deal with this thing. In my opinion, I don't think that it was adrenochrome specifically, but they found like a thing. It's almost like they found out what THC was, but they still don't know what CBD and CBG and what terpenes are or any of these other things for like an entourage kind of effect. But they did see like, oh, crazy people have high levels of adrenochrome in their blood. The superficial is like, oh, adrenochrome's making them crazy. That's kind of the simplified premise, but I think it's way more complex than that, but it's on that same path.
So it's essentially a psychedelic, you would say?
The earliest word they had for it was a psychotomimetic, meaning it mimicked psychosis. It turned you into someone that had, so maybe less fun.
Why would
than
that be
traditional.
desirable? I don't understand.
So this is early on, right? This is 1950s. They're throwing it, and again, Humphrey Osmond had not yet come up with the word psychedelic. So you had a short list of names you could kind of pick from, and they made up this psychotomimetic. but for whatever reason, I guess it doesn't roll off the tongue very well. So it goes from psychotomimetic to psychogenic, meaning that it can like generate, like fit like psychoses or like affect your mind in certain ways. And then hallucinogen also can sometimes be like a broader term. So the original phrasing of psychotomimetic, this will make you act psychotic, that kind of just doesn't get used because someone made it up and it didn't catch, and it ends up finding its way again in Aldous Huxley. He's like, yeah, whatever, psychotomimetic, like it's like mescaline, right? And I'm sure at some point Humphrey Osmond, who personally gave Aldous Huxley his first dose of mescaline, which is documented. I think that when they were having that discussion, he's telling them, oh, and by the way, there's this other thing called adrenochrome, kind of like this. And then Aldous Huxley's the one that brings this to the rest of the world. No one's reading these 1954 scientific papers about adrenochrome. Aldous Huxley is what popularizes that term. So I think that maybe he, in part, sort of mixed it in with cannabis and LSD and mescaline as if it were in the same category when it's kind of not. But I mean, for that time, they were all brand new. It was all novel.
Am I correct in saying that animal adrenochrome can just be purchased online, maybe a medical supply company, something along those lines? Is human adrenochrome somehow different? Does it have different properties that are more desirable?
I'm not big into supernatural stuff, so I would say no. I would say that if you can isolate adrenochrome from any animal, or more likely now, it would be derived from petrochemicals. They would have eventually take petroleum runoff from oil process and then use that to create all of the different precursors that they would need to just create it in a lab. But to answer the first part of your question, yeah, you can go online in theory and buy adrenochrome. Well, guess who has tried to order adrenochrome from every single website that ever comes up when someone's like, "Hey, you can just order it here." I have tried to order. If someone sends me a new link, I will try and order it. Here's what usually happens is you reach out and they're like, "Okay, send me the credentials of whatever lab that you work with
Okay,
and
yeah.
whatever research project you're working on and all this." Even from China, even from Alibaba. Let's
Okay.
say that somehow I was able to order it from China, or I found a way to get it here in the States without questionable sources. The next problem is that all of that adrenochrome, if you look at the pictures of it, it's like a little vial of like red powder, sometimes like a little more brownish of a powder. That is a shelf stable version of this. This would almost be like telling you, oh yeah, you want some orange
Hmm.
juice, and then giving you like one of those candied oranges that's just like all
Okay.
gelatin and like 1% juice. Like here you go, here's oranges, make juice.
Uh,
So it's a shelf stable version called semi carbazochrome, where they basically take this highly unstable. Because remember, adrenochrome means that color that they saw as it went from a clear liquid into a pink liquid. Well, if you just sat there and kept watching it, it rapidly goes from pink to red to purple to black. Once it gets to purple and dark black, all of the psychedelic properties ascribed to it are gone. It basically becomes psychedelically inert, although it is used for other things like blood clotting and surgeries and stuff. However, all that stuff online that you see in powdered form, it is psychedelically inert. It does not have any sort of
hmm.
psychological effects to it. And this was documented thoroughly by Osmond, Smithies, and Hoffer in the 1950s because they were putting this research out. And to summarize their words and make it a little bit brief, they were like, anyone that was trying to discount their work or tell them that they hadn't found this new psychedelic, they were using this shelf stable version because no one was basically had the right finesse or the skills or the quality supply to work with such a highly unstable liquid that within minutes of being out in room temperature would deteriorate to the point of not having any effect anymore. So
Hmm.
as they were kind of patting themselves in the back, like we knew how to synthesize it, we had the right connect. That guy knew how to make the freshest adrenochrome, and we did it immediately. We didn't let it sit around on a shelf. They didn't need to make it shelf stable. So I think there's a huge difference between what you can order online and actually getting what you'd say aqueous, meaning it's still in a liquid form and it still has like a bright red, bright pink hue to it.
How can we even connect this to the stories we hear about the elites using this in either ritualistic purposes or harvesting it directly from people to live forever. Some of the things you normally hear in conspiracy circles. How do we connect what we're just talking about? Because it sounds like it is something that can be got from anything and not just humans. Why is it connected with Satanism?
Well, now we have to take 3 steps back where I had brought up the blood libel angle, and if you're not familiar with blood libel, it is typically ascribed to like anti-Semitic theories. If you were to look up, it's on, it hits all of the top, 10 ADL type things. But blood libel goes back to at least the 12th century, maybe earlier, maybe a little bit later. But it's basically this concept that there were these witches and these covens and these secret cabals of people that would go and kidnap children, babies, and just young virgin Christian children,
Shit.
typically in the stories, and that they would drain them of their blood, and that they were eating them and they were drinking blood. And there's just so many if you just go and search for blood libel on like Wikipedia, there's probably like a top 10 of all the instances historically that this has come up. So here you've got a very long, like over 1,000 years of mythology about drinking the blood of children and the blood of babies, right? And for some sort of mystical, magical, supernatural purposes, specifically for over 1,000 years. If you just go back maybe 500 years, now you've got like witchcraft angles, and you've got blood magic and ceremonial blood magic, and even modern day, the concept of like sex magic and using sexual fluids and blood mixed in with that, and like Golden Dawn or like Gnostic Mass type principles. What is it, like the unholy mass or the black mass, where you've got the cakes of light and all of this? It's all sort of related into this angle of consuming a potentially charged fluid from another creature, human, animal, whatever. But that there's some sort of je ne sais quoi, if I'm Monsieur Paranoid, right? There's like a
Is
je
it
ne sais quoi, like a unnamed thing that makes this special in some way. And here's the bridge to adrenochrome, where yes, adrenochrome does have evidence based on Osmond, Smithies, and Hoffer that it's psychotomimetic slash psychedelic. If you take it, you'll get fucked up. It's kind of a long story short of it. You can hallucinate off of it. So it is worthy to be called a psychedelic, and whatever your definition is. Those same things were being ascribed to drinking blood and eating people and eating brains and all sorts of other practices from many cultures across the world. What adrenochrome does is now you've got a chemical that you can be a secularist. You don't have to believe in any supernatural ability. You don't have to be behind any religion or have any morality. And you have just like this secular chemical. And if you now say that secular chemical, if I ingest that, that will give me some kind of longevity, power, psychedelic insight, whatever. It's bridging the gap between claims about eating blood and flesh that required supernatural belief, required religious belief. Well, now you don't have to have supernatural or religious belief. You can start looking into adrenochrome, and it's like, wow, you really can literally torture, take the blood of a tortured person, ingest it, and feel a different effect than had you not tortured them. Now, I'm being very superficial, but those are the dots that are being connected. And I think that's where it gets all this. It's not just that it was written about by Hunter S. Thompson and Aldous Huxley, and it was made into like a tiny little background in a Kubrick movie. That's not what makes this such a pervasive mythology. It's the fact that it kind of acts as this secular vehicle to take 1,000 years of superstition and now make it so you can believe in science and believe in the superstition.
Do you think they believe there is life extension properties within this?
I would say like no originally, but there was a paper by Dr. Abram Hoffer, 1994, I believe, the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine, or it might have been 96, but it's called the Adrenochrome Hypothesis Revisited. And in this, he makes some really in substantial claims that are highly contested, but he says them nonetheless. And this is the guy that puts iron in your cereal, by the way. And he basically said that in their research, they found this trend because when they were doing adrenochrome research, you could have just said schizophrenia research, and it almost would have meant the same thing. Adrenochrome would have been a tiny rabbit hole into schizophrenia, but overall, it was like schizophrenia research. So he's talking about when you compare schizophrenics and say like people that have cancer in their family line. So one side of your family has got schizophrenia, dementia, Alzheimer's. Another, like your dad's line, maybe it's got all cancer down the way. He was putting forth this theory that people that have schizophrenia in their family line are somehow able to overcome like malignant cancers. And one of the studies that he cited, this is getting on the fringe angles of science here, but one of the studies was that they tested all of these habitual smokers that they were smoking like 2 packs a day, plus for their entire life, and then seeing how many of them got malignant forms of lung cancer or any other types of actual cancer. And the people that had schizophrenia in their family line had far less. It was more than just a statistical
Wow.
anomaly. So the theory was that if you've got schizophrenia in your DNA, then you might somehow have a resistance towards not just cancer, but all sorts of other biological events. Again, this is 94. And another one that he cited was the bubonic plague. He was pushing that theory further and saying that a majority of the people that survived the bubonic plague did so because they had some kind of schizophrenia in their family line, some kind of dementia. And the scientific reason for this, if I can try and summarize it in my bumpkin tinfoil skull a little bit, but it's that the reason that they found high levels of adrenochrome in schizophrenic patients is because if you're going through an actual episode with schizophrenia, you are going into fight or flight, right? You're perceiving all sorts of dangers. You're perceiving that you need to move around and do things. So you're dumping adrenaline into your system nonstop, way more than a normal person would. If we're just sitting here, I don't just get an adrenaline dump randomly. Well, a schizophrenic might get those dumps. So what happens is that it forces the heart to process all this adrenaline. And if your heart can't keep up with that, you get a heart attack and you die. You get essentially all the toxins build up in your heart ceases to function, and there's no more you. If you're able to process it, then that means it's converting all that adrenaline into adrenochrome, which would result in higher adrenochrome levels in your blood. So the thing that he was getting at was that people that have schizophrenia are ultimately able to process adrenaline by their heart much faster than someone that doesn't have it in their family line. So if you got into like a adrenaline dump situation, or if you had to go through some crazy event like getting bubonic plague, then your body's ability to process adrenaline faster than other people's might actually be a trait that will help you survive. And then on a long enough timeline, we just got a bunch of schizophrenics running around all the time.
So essentially, this substance, this adrenochrome, may be extremely more potent if ingested right after it comes out of a human, essentially, and it may have life extension properties. And these psychopaths enjoy hunting humans. So you combine all those things, and it's just a luxurious drug for them, essentially.
If you're making a vampire movie, that's kind of how all those dots connect, right? But just to put a hat on the hat of that adrenochrome hypothesis revisited, what he was basically saying is that it's not you that gets to live another 20 years, but it's that if you put schizophrenia into your family line, if you can bring yourself to the brink of going crazy and then keep bringing yourself back from that, I'd talk about like going to the gym. Maybe taking adrenochrome is like taking steroids while you're going to the gym, right? So if you're taking adrenochrome and you're going through these like intentional schizophrenic psychedelic bouts, you're kind of working yourself up. And what it's doing is that it might make your great grandchildren live longer. You might not live longer, but you might be extending your family line, and they might survive the next bubonic plague. They might be able to smoke 2 packs a day and not get lung cancer, like so in a dynasty way, if I'm trying to run a dynasty here, and I actually care about my bloodline in a Fabian society type of way, yes, it extends life. But the claim of like you snort you torture a baby and snort a line of their blood, you live them an extra 5 years. That's like video game Hollywood logic. I mean, if you boil it down, kind of, that's kind of what's happening visually in a visceral way. But I think that all the elements are there. Like the incentive for your great grandkids to live longer might be there. So it's just, it gets tied up into this mythology. And for the record, I believe the amount of adrenochrome when they were testing it and they were saying it had these psychedelic properties and everything, I think it was something around like 10 cow adrenal glands that had to be boiled down for the dose of one person. So whenever there is a claim of like, oh yeah, they're ripping off like a little girl's face, well, you better be ripping off like 30 girls' faces because that dose is not going to be enough unless you believe in like, microdosing adrenochrome.
Do you think it's not as widespread a phenomena that conspiracy culture would have you believe?
The jury's a little bit out because of how the CIA and MK Ultra literally took over all of the psychedelic research for adrenochrome. So I don't think that it's like True Blood or Vampire Diaries or Buffy the Vampire Slayer style, but it does seem like there's a there. To quote, I don't remember who originally said that. Someone smart, I'm sure, but that they found something useful enough to suppress it and include it in this research. And I don't even necessarily think that it's like going to change the world and we have to, tell everyone to make sure we open back up adrenochrome investigation. What really makes me the most interested about this entire topic is that if I were to just post a paper that just like, hey, here's a research article from 1930 that says Freemasons funded adrenochrome research. If I just made that the whole post, just objective, factual proof, scientific paper, no other opinion or any sort of, injected analysis, I would just get all sorts of comments. Some saying like, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. This is all fake. This is BS. And then you'd get people saying like, yeah, man, they're torturing kids for all of this. And the amount of different, very like extremist sort of comments from both sides from stating objective fact. That's what caught my attention to begin with, because it was like, well, wait a minute, like both of you are wrong, but it's not like just because the guy saying it's fake is wrong. Now that also means that George Bush is putting Capri Sun straws into like babies' heads or something. But like again, ornament bunting exists. People hunting baby giraffes like that. Those things exist. People do horrific things. So the argument is no longer, do I think that people with unlimited assets and resources that know they can get away with stuff, would they do something horrific to a vulnerable person? You bet your ass they would. I'd bet on black every single time in that bet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they have too many choices of debaucherous activities to take part of. It's terrifying. Last few minutes, let's make another strange jump from adrenochrome to UFO disclosure. Maybe there's a connection there, who knows? But what are your thoughts on some of the information that's coming out, why it's coming out now? To me, I see a big nothing burger, especially with some of the quote unquote evidence that's in the files. It's nothing that we haven't seen before, and I don't see anything earth-shattering coming yet, but what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I don't want to disappoint anyone too much, and I know that this is almost like cliche to say at this point, but I feel like it's a distraction from the Epstein files, the one conspiracy that's actually relevant and affects people in our lifespans, right? People that are currently in power, all sorts of unanswered questions. Who else has even gone to jail over any of this, right? The people running the whorehouse, but none of the Johns have really been seeing any sort of traction on this. So that's part of it. The other part is that aside from the UFO.gov disclosure stuff and all of the new UAP guys coming out of the woodwork, as they always are, because it's sort of, when the song plays, you come out and you dance to it, right? So like the UFO song's playing, so all the typical dancers come out and they're doing all their typical dances. It makes sense. There was a even bigger disclosure though, I think last year, and it was the Pentagon. So I don't know how well versed or interested you were on like Corey Good and David Wilcock and all of their.
I thought it was hilarious.
Okay,
some
but
nonsense,
but you've heard the
yes.
claims then.
Yes.
So and they have a good way of mentioning like 20 legit things, and then they'll sneak in like, and I went to school on Saturn, for 20 years.
Right.
And because the first 20 things I say check out, the 21st thing also has to check out. Well, one of the things that they said that did check out, I can't remember the exact event name or date, but I'm just going to make up a name in a year, but it was like 50s or 60s or something. And the claim was that the US and Russia had all these ICBM missiles and these warheads kind of like ready to go just in case, someone was ready to end the world. And there were claims that have been verified by multiple sources at this point that an unknown event caused all of those missiles to become either inert or like either they couldn't launch them or the warheads themselves became inert. I think it was just they couldn't launch the missiles for whatever reason. And this gets claimed in the David Wilcock and Corey Good and all of these other variations that aliens were basically protecting us from ourselves, that they saw that humans were about to blow up the earth and they need earth to use it as like their interstitiary like energy source to get into whatever galactic war they're on or whatever. But they were like, hold on, we can't let you humans blow up the earth. So it was the aliens that came and they deactivated all of the ICBMs so that we couldn't do that. This in 2025, the Pentagon came out and they admitted that when the UFO stories were coming into the news, where people were saying like, "Oh yeah, it's the aliens preventing us from blowing ourselves up," that they actively leaned into that they did what they could to sort of help perpetuate that becoming the story. And in 2025, they mentioned, oh, and by the way, it was just us testing EMPs, electromagnetic pulse devices, and that's
Whoa.
what shut down everything. Like, oops, somebody, hit the button at the wrong time, and we disabled all of our
Really?
ICBMs. And maybe someone in Russia also did that, or maybe they were testing that in Russia. You don't get all the details as you would expect from, Pentagon. But that's the curious part is that they admitted they leaned into it in a will, and that's William Cooper was one of the OGs for me. That was his origin story, was that he was in naval intelligence and he claims that he was told to put all these fake UFO abduction stories out into the world, and then he found out later that like it was all BS. That's contested whether or not he knew at the time, but that's his story, was that his original job for naval intelligence was to put fake UFO stories out. And here's the Pentagon literally telling you, yeah, we were doing that with this specific case, and now we're going to say it was an EMP. And like my brain kind of like runs in opposite directions. I can feel like the internal like incongruence trying to figure out, well, does that mean aliens are real because they're saying it was just an EMP test and don't worry about it and it was us making the UFO stories? Or do I believe that it really was an EMP device and now we've got the official story that makes sense and that means that aliens aren't real? Or it just maybe kicks up mud and adds confusion to the whole equation, which I guess is where you kind of started on all this.
Yeah. Well, where are you at with what the nature of UFOs and people's contact or abduction experiences, what may really be happening? Where are you at with all that?
I don't think I'm a believer. If you were to go through my catalog, again, not to sort of unimpress anybody or make you disappointed in me, but I've been doing this for a long time with comics and animations and games and stuff. And the one conspiracy topic that or the one of the two that you won't really find in what I do, one of those is aliens and UFOs. I might lean into it at a certain point, but usually for me, it takes like a Gnostic angle. Like I'd rather play with the idea of Gnostics and sort of demiurges and angels and demons than I
Right,
would
right,
with
right.
UFOs and aliens. But I would also say like potato tomato a little bit, right? Or however the phrase goes.
Yeah. It can all be interchangeable depending on how you're looking at it. We're in such interesting times, man, and thank you for coming back on. Before I let you go, is there anything that you are currently working on that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I've got these paranoid pamphlets that I've been working on, which are kind of like old school Chick tracks. And if you know who that is, definitely look up Jack T. Chick, but he was one of the most prolific comic artists of all time. They're basically these little 3x5 index card sized comics that break down. I've got one on MK Ultra. I've got one on the Bavarian Illuminati, and I'm working on one on the Titanic, one on Bigfoot, one on the Satanic Panic, a whole bunch of them that I've planned on coming out. But the reason these things exist is for people to buy a big batch of them, and that you can enjoy it, but then you can also go and like leave it in a public area. If you're going on an airplane or something, like leave it out in the lobby. If you're going to a restaurant and leaving a considerable tip, throw it in there with that considerable tip or whatever, just to give them out to people. Because instead of saying like, hey, dude, Google MK Ultra to your normie friends or family members, here you can give them like a little thing that'll fit in their pocket. It's not a big bulky comic book that they're like, oh yeah, maybe I'll read this one day, and they never do. It'll actually get read. And it's the best way to convert a normie from like, I don't even know what that is, to now they're an expert on the Bavarian Illuminati.
I love it, man. That's awesome. Thank you again, brother. This was fantastic. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all then. Watch Doors of Perception, now on Amazon Prime. Are you and your family prepared for an emergency? Maybe the fake alien invasion? Now is the time to prepare yourself and your family for any event. Check out Prep Starts Now. Their mission is to provide high-quality preparedness products that empower individuals and families to be ready for any situation. They're committed to delivering reliable, trusted gear to ensure your safety, security, and peace of mind in times of need. Their product selection is carefully curated to provide you with the essential gear you need to stay prepared. From emergency kits to tactical tools, every item is chosen for its reliability and practicality. Prep Starts Now understands the importance of family, and their goal is to equip you with everything you need to build a solid plan for your family's preparedness. In today's ever-changing world, being prepared is more important than ever, and Prep Starts Now is here to help you and your family stay ready with quality products and practical guidance. Use the link in the description and get 15% off your order. We live in an incredible age of information. More and more, we're discovering that we've been lied to and misled about much of our human history. Cory Hughes is providing profound revelations about World War I, World War II, the JFK assassination, Martin Luther King's assassination, and much, much more on his new Substack, Bloody History. Subscribe now for as little as $5 monthly. Just click that link right in the description to get started now and learn about our true history. Hello, friends. If you're looking to start your therapeutic microdosing journey, but don't know where to start, especially when looking for the highest quality ingredients, including nootropics, and what you'd expect from a true microdose capsule, check out our friends at Brainsupreme. They offer the absolute highest quality ingredients so you can start your microdosing journey knowing that you're getting top-notch ingredients. To find out more, visit their website using that link right in the description, and you can get 15% off your entire order.